Hey everybody, thanks for coming to check out the 2019 EconoNAS. This video accompanies a blog that I wrote on the same topic, how to build an inexpensive do-it-yourself network attached storage box, or NAS for short. In prior years I've done EconoNAS builds, and what I usually wound up doing was finding a motherboard that was inexpensive but met my needs, and then putting the least expensive CPU and the least amount of RAM and a bunch of inexpensive hard drives in it and calling it the EconoNAS. And what I found over the years is that those never aged very well. You know, the inexpensive parts were towards the end of their life cycle and pretty obsolete at the time that I was building them. So this year with the 2019 EconoNAS, I took a step back and tried to do things a little bit differently. Rather than buy the least expensive parts and come up with the cheapest NAS that I could build, I tried to focus a little bit on the value. And a lot of my component choices this year, I wound up spending more per component than I did in prior year's builds. But I did that because I thought either that the performance was better or that the upgradability was there, and that the EconoNAS would have a longer lifespan than the ones that preceded it. And also this year, I didn't put any hard drives into the EconoNAS, and I'm not going to be putting any hard drives into my DIY NAS builds overall. Ultimately, how much storage you need is a pretty personal choice. In the blog, I've captured kind of a few different suggestions of different ways that you could tackle building your own array. Hopefully one of them will align to what you're needing, and the rest of the NAS build can be used as a blueprint. So what makes this year's DIY NAS a little bit different than the prior years? Well, for starters, it has a Ryzen 3 2200G CPU. It's got 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM. It's got, on the motherboard, it supports up to 6 SATA devices, and there's 3 PCIe slots that could be used for future upgrades. The case also has room for up to 10 different hard drives. Let's check out those parts now. For the power supply, I wound up choosing the Thermaltake TR2 430 watt power supply. It's just it's a standard ATX power supply. Not especially a ton unique about it. It was fairly well reviewed, and I liked what I read about it. And most importantly, it was priced pretty well for what I was looking for in this year's EconoNAS build. There we go. Power cables. Got an electrical cable. It's got a whole mess of power connectors. And what I'm always interested in most is the number of SATA connectors. There's 5, and then there's some more. The best part about the power supply was its price, and it seemed to be pretty well reviewed and highly regarded. At 430 watts, it would be more than capable of handling quite a few hard drives. Kind of excited to find something that was well reviewed and pretty inexpensive. And that's about all I got to say about the power supply. And for the USB drives, I went ahead and went with the SanDisk Ultra Fit flash drives. If you've been following my blog and my various DIY NAS builds over the years, you'll realize that I'm a big fan of the SanDisk, both the Cruiser Fit and now the Ultra Fit. It's higher performing sibling. I've never had any problems with. They've never been incredibly expensive, and I've been really pleased with them. I there's not a whole lot to say about them. What's unique this year on the EconoNAS is that I opted to go with a pair of USB drives. Normally I just went with one to save a few dollars. I figured this year, it was not a whole lot of money that was being saved, and I like being able to mirror the OS drive, since FreeNAS runs on the USB drive for you, to mirror the OS drive and to have a little bit extra redundancy there as well. On the outside of the case, there are 3 5¼ inch external drives, one 3½ external drive, and then inside there are, oh god, I can't count. We'll just read it right off this page. There are 6 internal 3½ drives, one internal 2½ inch drive. So for a total of 11 drive bays altogether. Now, most of your NAS drives, I imagine, are going to be 3½ inch drives, so you'll need adapters, but you've got up to 10 drives in a relatively inexpensive case. Kind of made it a no-brainer for me. It is the Asus Prime B450M-A motherboard, and there's a few things that I'm really excited about it. Above all, it is a AMD A4 socket, CPU socket, so we'll be building my first AMD NAS in quite a long time. It is a smaller board. It's a micro ATX motherboard. It's got 4 DIMM slots that support DDR4 RAM up to 6 gig. It's got onboard video, and it's got, most importantly, it's got my minimum number of onboard SATA ports for my NAS builds. This is just a number that I like. It needs to have at least 6 or more. We got 4 here and 2 here. And for the memory this year in the EconoNAS, I opted to go with this Ballistics 16 gig kit of DDR4 2666 memory. Normally on the EconoNAS, I opt for the minimum recommended RAM for FreeNAS. This year is going to be a little bit different in that I went with the suggested amount, which is 16 gig, versus the minimum amount, which is 8 gig. I didn't pick the white because it was cooler looking or anything. It just wound up being a little bit cheaper than the other colors they had to offer. For the CPU, I wound up picking the AMD Ryzen 3 2200G. I was excited about this because I really like what AMD's done with their CPUs, and I haven't built an AMD powered NAS since my very first one ages ago. I'm really kind of excited about some of the upgrade options that going with the Ryzen platform are going to offer. As I understand it, there will be an entirely new generation of CPUs that's not even released yet that'll be supported by the motherboard that I picked, and I think that's a huge benefit and a great perk for an economical NAS build. Oh, I need a knife. Now that we've been able to talk about the parts a little bit, let's talk about the assembly. All things considered, the EconoNAS's build went really quickly. I was done with it in about an hour to an hour and a half. I had 2 areas of challenges, which you'll see in the time lapse that's about to come. I had a hard time getting the standoffs in the right places for the micro ATX motherboard, and then I also had a few moments of difficulty with the SATA connectors in the lower right hand corner of the motherboard stick out at a 90-degree angle towards the drive bay. So routing cables from those SATA ports then back up to the drives was a bit of a challenge. But all things considered, it went together like a snap. Once I had it all assembled, I went ahead and booted it up off of a bootable USB drive that had memtest on it and started running its suite of tests against the RAM. I neglected the machine for nearly a day, and when I checked on it the next day, it had over 10 full suites of tests completed without any errors. This is totally overkill. I would have been perfectly happy with three to four suites of successful tests. I just happened to get busy doing other things. After completing the memory test, I went ahead and installed FreeNAS on it, and using 6 4TB drives that I'm using to test my NAS builds, I built a RAID Z2 array and then used IOmeter to do some throughput testing. I was really excited to see that the EconoNAS actually beat the DIY NAS 2019 edition from earlier this year in a couple of the different tests, and it nearly saturated the gigabit network. As is always the case with my DIY NAS builds, I wind up giving the NAS away to one of my various followers. Entering is simple. If you go visit the blog and scroll down to the bottom of the page, you can enter a number of different ways. You can follow me on Twitter, you can retweet a particular tweet about the DIY NAS, EconoNAS, you can visit my blog's Facebook page, you can visit my blog's YouTube channel, and then there's also an option to get 5 bonus entries by referring your friends. Again, please check out my blog at the very bottom to enter the giveaway. What do you guys think of the EconoNAS? What choices did I make that you liked? What choices did I make that you maybe disagreed with a bit? I'd love to hear your comments in the... What do you all think of the EconoNAS? Does it really tick off the boxes for an inexpensive NAS build? Or would you prefer something like an off-the-shelf solution from the Synologies and QNAPs of the world? I'd really love to hear your thoughts on it. Please leave them down in the comments below. And make sure to check out my Show Me Your DIY NAS builds on butterwhat.com. Again, thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing what you guys think.